As I'm sure anyone can imagine, CIA doesn't change unless it has to. And in the middle of the Obama administration, it became apparent to CIA that they had a mole inside the organization. He was a CIA officer, but he was working for a geopolitical rival that was also trying to become a superpower. And that geopolitical rival was at all efforts trying to steal American technology, trying to steal American financial institution information, trying to steal IP, trying to mimic military and industrial tools. That made a significant dent, not just in CIA's operations, but also in CIA's mission to ensure American primacy. So the CIA approached my wife and I because they needed people from outside of the mole's sphere of influence in order to create a whole new type of operation, insulated from the damage the mole could cause. Standard operating procedure for a CIA operation at the time was that you would send one, maybe two officers out to a foreign country where they would not overlap, and then they would carry out independent operations and then come back to their home base and report their information. When we had to build a new style of operation, my wife and her experience in her role as a targeter identified that the most difficult target for us to track was a terrorist target. And then she leaned on me and my experience chasing terrorists in the field to confirm her suspicion, but also to kind of create operational practices that mimicked terrorist networks. The way they move money, the way they communicate, the way they decentralize information and command and control. And that foundation in terrorism became the model for our new operational process. So as we built our shadow cell, the reason we called it a cell was because it was based off of a terrorist cell. We created minimal access to the people who were inside. We created a firewall essentially between the leadership at CIA and the leadership of the cell in the field, so that there was only one pass-through, one connection between the two groups. And then we made me the pass-through for those two groups, because if my cover gets blown or if I'm the one that gets captured, that would give CIA and the operators in the cell a heads up that something was wrong. It would help them find the mole at CIA, but it would help us keep our operators safe in the field, because the mole would never be able to find the operators. The mole would only be able to find me. According to CIA headquarters, my job was to orchestrate, develop, and essentially deploy the cell. It was an administrative job. But the senior operator inside the cell thought differently because of my experience at the farm. So when he found out that I was both administratively certified and operationally capable, he made a field call to actually start using me in the field to deploy into hostile territory. And that made our cell really much more capable and effective than previous CIA operations. I could essentially go in advance of any case officer, and I could handle all of the administrative footwork in the country itself. And if people want to know what administrative footwork looks like at CIA, it means you're the one who buys the expensive whiskey on a fake credit card. You're the one who smuggles in bundles of cash and hides it under a bridge. You're the one who travels from country to country to get throwaway cell phones and then puts those throwaway cell phones in secret places throughout a target location. So now when the case officers land in country, they don't have to create any footprint for themselves. They can essentially be a complete ghost because I have pre-stationed all of their operational resources.
And you've done this under an alias in a cover story?
Absolutely. I myself am working under alias. I myself am working under a backstopped cover identity, which means that even as federal authorities from the target country look me up, they can find my credit card, they can find my residence, they can find my work history. It's all fake because it's all been created by CIA, but it's real to them. So then there's no reason for them to dig any further.
What were you posing as?
The details of my alias are classified still. What I've been allowed to express is that I was in a commercial capacity. I used a name similar to my name. My true name is Andrew. My alias names almost always would start with the letter A. It just makes it easier for me to be able to remember them on the move. I look Latino. My surname should be Latino. It wouldn't make very much sense to give me a surname that was Russian. So that's how our aliases are built, and that's how we operate. And then for me, I was able to operate in a commercial context because we knew that our target country was vulnerable to commercial ploys. It wanted to become a competitor to the United States. So instead of coming in under some kind of diplomatic identity, I would come in under a commercial identity.
And it gives you an opportunity to blend in and you don't get noticed, right?
Exactly. And when you talk about blending in or when you talk about being a gray man, people don't realize that that doesn't mean that you're neutral. It doesn't mean that you are dead weight. It means that you are just slightly contributory. You're just slightly liked. You're just slightly welcomed. That's how you truly become gray, because in the moment, nobody feels threatened by you. And 5 minutes after you leave, nobody remembers you were there. So the magic to being CIA, the magic to really actually living and working undercover, is to be just slightly liked, but not liked enough to be remembered.
How much danger would you have been in if you'd got caught?
Even though I was traveling in a role that was administrative, I was executing acts of espionage. I was crossing borders in a fraudulent identity with fake documentation. That is an offense around the world.
CIA believes that all people are born with a spy secret superpower. For some people, that means they can win deals. For others, they can spot liars. Some can even seduce lovers. I built a free 3-minute test to help reveal to you exactly what your secret hidden superpower is. All you have to do is click on the link in the description below, take the test, and start using your spy superpower to stay ahead of 99% of people.
Even just dropping a cell phone or leaving $1,000 under a bridge is grounds to be incarcerated in that country, tried under their legal system, and executed. While it was very high stakes, it was also something that we had learned specifically to master at the farm.
Was there ever a moment where you did feel your life was in danger on one of these operations?
At the peak of our shadow cell operation, I fell under scrutiny by a sophisticated surveillance unit. Generally speaking, when you travel to a hostile country, if you're a person of interest, you'll come across something that I call bumbling surveillance. People who are off work, people who are retired, people who are nosy Nellies, who are just following you because they know that you're not from their country. And they're looking for a quick payday. If they find somebody on the phone talking about a trade deal, they can report that to the police, and the police can decide whether or not to tap their phone. But that's just a bumbling, untrained surveillance person. When you come across a trained surveillance team, they know how to be discreet. They know how to hide in the shadows. They know the right distance to stay behind you. They have resources that your normal bumbling surveillant doesn't have. But also, your bumbling surveillant gets told not to follow you that day. The first tip that turned me on to the fact that something may be wrong was the lack of a surveillant, was the lack of a bumbling fool. I'd always had one. I had always expected one. And when that person wasn't there, my first instinct was actually to pat myself on the back and tell myself how good I was at spying. But immediately after that, I realized I probably am not that good. What has probably happened is that I need to turn up my own awareness and look to see if I've been surveilled by a sophisticated team. And I went from that moment into what we call a surveillance detection route, or a professional series of movements that's designed to disclose a surveillance team. After identifying that I was under a more sophisticated surveillance team, I knew that I had to get out of the country. Once you're a person of interest, it's just a matter of time before the country can leverage more resources to capture you, to arrest you, to detain you. So my number one goal was to self-evacuate, to get myself out of the country. And I looked at different ways of doing that, and I decided that the most cover-consistent way to leave the country was through a commercial airport. It was going to raise the least red flags. It would give me the most public environment to try to resist their temptation to arrest me or wrap me up, because an airport is a very public place, and it would potentially create an incident to have a foreigner arrested in an airport with or without charges that they would share immediately. When I went to pass through security at the airport, however, my passport had been flagged. So I was immediately moved into secondary screening, and I was pushed into an interrogation room with 2 different interrogators. I got very fortunate because the interrogators themselves were not as well trained as I was. So I could see their techniques, I could see their struggles, I could see the lack of coordination in their interrogation, which empowered me to resist. It empowered me to counter. And that doesn't mean I argued back with them. It means I knew that I had a position of information superiority over them in this particular interrogation. in the end, after a few hours of interrogation, they ended up letting me go because they didn't have enough to hold me any longer. So as I'm leaving the interrogation on the concourse going to the plane, even as I'm boarding the plane, even as the plane is taking off and flying through foreign airspace, at no point did I ever feel like I had escaped.